Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Education Candidates Forum, hosted by the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County. My name is Jennifer Young, and I'm pleased to be representing the Montgomery County Council of PTAs, one of the co-sponsors of tonight's forum. This is the first time this candidates forum has been delivered virtually, and we want to thank the candidates for participating in this format and thank all of the co-sponsoring organizations for their tremendous help in putting this forum together. Those organizations are Identity, NAACP Montgomery County Parents Council, the Metro DC chapter of PFLAG, formerly known as Parents, Families, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, the OCA Greater Washington DC chapter Asian Pacific American Advocates, and the American Association of University Women in Maryland and the Montgomery County branches. At this point, I would like to ask Diego Uriburu of Identity to remind everyone about the guidelines that apply to the forum. Thank you. Diego?
Thank you very much, Jennifer, and welcome everyone. We are delighted to have so many people watching tonight. To ensure smooth operations, there will be no live participation from the audience. Instead, we'll have a fantastic moderator who will ask questions that have come from three sources. Questions prepared by sponsoring organizations, questions submitted in advance by members of the public, and questions from students. All candidates will be asked to respond to each question. We'll ask both candidates from a district or at large to respond in sequence so that the audience can compare candidates. We ask that the candidates unmute themselves when they are given an opportunity to speak and to mute themselves when their time has expired. Tonight's forum moderator is Diane Hibino, co-president of the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County, and I'm very, very pleased to introduce her. Diane.
Thank you, Diego, and thank you, Jennifer. Thank you all for attending this important candidate forum for the Board of Education. Remember that for this upcoming election, we are voting for candidates for one at-large seat on the board, one for District 2, and one for District 4. The other three Board of Education districts and the other at-large seat are not up for re-election at this time. There is a time clock window that will count down the time left for the candidates, and they're urged to be mindful of the time so that everyone has an equal chance to respond. This is a forum, not a debate, and we will hear from each candidate on his or her position to the questions posed. In the first portion of the forum, which will last about an hour or so, I will be asking questions that come from our sponsoring organizations and from the public. In the final portion of the forum, I will ask questions that come from students of MCPS, that's Montgomery County Public Schools. So to start, the candidates will speak for 1 minute to introduce themselves. I will begin with the at-large candidates, Sunil Dasgupta, then Lynn Harris. Then I will ask District 2 candidates, Michael Fryer and Rebecca Somandroski. And finally, District 4, Shebra Evans, then Steve Solomon. However, throughout the forum, we will be changing the order of beginning. So please let us begin with Sunil. 1 minute for your opening.
Good evening. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and to all the other organizers of this event. The foundation of public education in the county are shaky. We have underfunded our schools for years. We've neglected a large number of our schools to the point that we do not have equal access. 50% of third graders read below grade level. Decisions about online education and reopening have been mismanaged. That students are still learning is a testament to educators, students, and families who have dug deep. We have to make this right. I'm a dad of 3 MCPS students and have a direct stake in making the system work. I recognize that for my kids to get the best possible education, all their peers must get the best possible education. I have years of experience in academic management, teaching, including teaching online. I support our teachers and staff so they may bring the best education possible to our students. This is not a silver bullet.
Thank you very much. Lynn Harris, you're next.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you to all the sponsoring organizations. My name is Lynn Harris, and I'm running for the at-large seat on the Board of Education, and I cut my teeth on education advocacy in this county largely as a member of MCC PTA, one of the sponsoring organizations here. And through my volunteer work, thousands of hours over more than a decade, I've learned about this school system and all of its myriad issues and the deep and wide ways that as a school system, we have to serve the needs of every single one of our students every single day. For the past 5 years, I've been a teacher in MCPS. I've been a parent in MCPS for 12 years. Bringing that experience to the board is incredibly important to me. However, I also can bring my experience as a lawyer, as a nurse, and as a public health expert to helping the school system move forward out of a time of crisis into what comes next.
Thank you. Michael Fryer, District 2. You need to. Michael is not unmuted, Steve, sorry. We cannot hear Michael. Okay, maybe Steve can keep on working. Why don't we move on and then come back to you, Michael? I'm sorry, why don't we just move on? We'll come back. So Rebecca Somandroski, also District 2.
Test, 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 test.
So, thank you. My name is Rebecca Somandroski. I'm a 22-year resident of Montgomery County, serving my second term on the Board of Education representing District 2. I have 2 MCPS graduates, a daughter who currently attends the University of Mississippi and a son who's stationed overseas in the Army. I got into this about 15, 16 years ago because I believe that every student should have a positive school experience and that means different things for different children. It's not just about getting A's and B's, it's about feeling safe, valued, engaged, and connected to your school and your future. It's about the fact that we need to be looking at resources and how we're utilizing them to make sure every staff member has what they need to be successful teachers and support staff, and that every student has what they need to be successful students and with a good future. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Now we'll try Michael Fryer.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent. Hello, I'm Michael Fryer. I have 2 children in the Montgomery County Public School System and 30 years experience in education. I started as an elementary school teacher. I then became a social worker with Child Protection Services before earning my law degree and representing children, families, and teachers in the education system. So I've been everywhere from in court, arguing for rights, civil rights and education rights, to sitting in IEPs, and that includes my own son, who is a special needs student, hearing impaired. One of the things that I bring is that in that experience is my experience in Hartford, Connecticut. I am only been in Montgomery County for 2 years, but Hartford, Connecticut did face a large number of the issues that Montgomery County is facing, and I've helped that system work through some of their issues and hope to bring my experience, and rather than reinventing the wheel, the success that Hartford had here to Montgomery County. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we'll go to District 4, Shebra Evans.
Sure. Good evening. Thank you to all the sponsors putting on this candidate forum today. I am Shebra Evans. I'm currently in the District 4 seat, serving as the president on the Montgomery County Board of Education, running for re-election. I have 2 daughters in the public school system, a freshman and senior at John F. Kennedy High School, and I'm running for re-election because at the start of Sydney's kindergarten year in 2008, we were talking about the achievement gap. Since serving on the board and over the period of years, we have worked really hard to be able to close the gap, to work to make certain that opportunities and student achievement are being realized for our students, lowering class sizes, expanding access, making certain that we're expanding pre-kindergarten program. I want to continue that work. We have much more to do, and I want to be here to do that work. Thank you for having me this evening.
Thank you, Shebra. All right, Steve Solomon, also District 4.
Thank you, Diane. Again, my name is Steve Solomon. I'm running for District 4. I want to thank the League of Women Voters and thank all of the sponsor organizations for putting together this forum tonight. I'm a lifelong resident of Montgomery County. So why am I running? I'm running to make our schools a little bit better. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I just want to make sure that the proper changes are made in our schools and the wrong ones are avoided. I want to make sure all of our schools are safe and modern, free of hazards like mold. I think things like that are something that should not be in Montgomery County schools. And one of the largest school systems in the country, one of the most wealthiest ones. We have amazing opportunities here. And I want to be on the board to make sure those things happen. I want to make sure we retain our best teachers. I want to make sure that we expand our vocational and technical programs in Montgomery County. And I look forward to talking to you more tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we'll begin the questions of the evening. And these questions will have 60-second answers. What is your view of the relationship between the members of the Board of Education and the Superintendent of Schools? We will start with at large, but this time Lynn begins.
Thank you. I think I would envision somewhat of a reimagined Board of Education that is doing more of an ongoing conversation with the superintendent and MCPS central office staff based on our ongoing engagement with the communities and the students that this very large school system serves. Currently, there's a rather top-down approach. The board is presented with policy recommendations and policy priorities of the superintendent and weighs in with some consultation and some input from the communities. But I think that we would make better decisions if we were engaging with our customers, the students, our communities, our staff in an ongoing way, instead of waiting to be presented an option and voting.
Okay, thank you. Also at large, Sunil.
Thank you. Recently, I was talking to a former board member who told me that the primary role of the board is to weigh options presented by senior leadership to them. I talked to a central office staffer a few days later who said that they were waiting all summer for guidance from the board to figure out what they would do in the fall. So this is a structural gap that there is in the system and has been there, for quite some time. It's not this board or earlier; it's been there for a long time. So I think the net result of that has been that primarily the superintendents has been leading the board. I would like to see the board lead. I would like to see the board have a staff to be able to come up with options, to be able then to push that through MCPS rather than to keep waiting for the staff to present more new options.
Okay, next we'll have Rebecca, please.
So thank you for the question. The way the board works right now, it's a very unique situation with the superintendent, as he is really our only employee. So everyone else in the system basically works for him. I agree 100%. It would be much better if we had a more collaborative relationship in terms of putting together ideas and proposals for the system. I think that it's unfortunate that there's a lot of history in how the board works with the superintendent in terms of relying specifically on the officers. I think that that's something that I would like to work very hard to change in terms of opening it up for all board members to have a more inclusive role in participating with the conversations with the superintendent. I think we should have our own staff, and people have to also remember this is a part-time job. So we do the best that we can in terms of making sure that we are presented with information as soon as possible, but we have to rely on his staff to do that.
Okay, thank you. Also, District 2, Michael. We can't hear you.
There we go. So the board works like any board, which is they're in charge of setting the agenda and the goals. And the CEO or the superintendent reports to them and is the captain of the ship. So while the board charts the course and sets the destination and builds in the factors, it's up to the captain to figure out how to get us to that destination. And that's kind of the relationship and what the board should be doing, determining, for instance, we need system-wide pre-kindergarten. So the superintendent goes, I'm going to achieve that goal, and I'm going to figure out how to do it with resources at hand. After that, the superintendent may come back and say, you know what, I'm going to need help to get system-wide pre-K. We're going to need, reach out with regard to tax dollars, reach out with regard to reach out with regard to achieving that. And then the board can rise up to that challenge and figure out how to contact or who to talk to in order to sway or argue or bring them on board. So there is a relationship there, but at the end of the day, the board sets the goals and the superintendent figures out how to achieve them.
Okay, thank you. Next, District 4, we'll start with Steve this time.
Okay, so the board decides if Dr. Smith continues as the superintendent or not. The board also decides on the budget primarily of a lot of schools, but then policy was made by Dr. Smith and his numerous staff. If you look at the org chart, there's a lot of directors in MCPS, and then they bring that back to the board. So as everyone said, I kind of want to echo that. If there was more of a symbiotic relationship there, if there was more influence by the board on perhaps decision-making before the policy is brought to the board for a vote, I think that would benefit all. But yes, there's no staff for board members. They're a part-time job, so they lack the infrastructure to develop policy and make all these decisions. If those existed, of course, I think the board should have more authority and more ability to interact with Superintendent Smith and make these decisions. So hopefully that's something we can get to at some point down the road. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Shevra, District 4.
Sure, thank you for that. For the past 2 years, I've served as the president on the board, and although there are 8 individuals on the board, one being a student, I've tried to make certain that this has been an inclusive process where the board continues to come together at our retreats to discuss what our priorities are. We as a board have come together with our shared interests and brought forward our priorities, and that's what you see at the board meetings. All the agenda items are as a result of what the board has said they want to see and hear presented to them, and as well as what we've heard from our community. So the board is taking ownership. We're making certain that we are setting the priority in the course of the school system, and we are working together with the superintendent to make certain that those ideas, those priorities, our interests are brought forward. Thank you.
Okay, next we'll go to equity issues. The resource study that MCPS commissioned from Education Resource Strategies revealed that only 5% of Latino students and 8% of Black students from low-income households take Algebra 1 in 7th grade, compared to 39% of their peers. That's true even when these students have the same score at the end of 6th grade. How specifically can the Board of Education remedy this inequity? What policy action, if any, would you recommend? This is 60 seconds. We'll start with District 2, Michael.
Well, that's a tragic number, unfortunately, that is just not reflective of where we should be. So the question becomes, what systemically is occurring that is preventing those children who score appropriately from being able to access those classes? Or there's just not enough classes, there's not enough teachers in order to address that number of students? Is there something else that is going on, which is resources are not being moved forward, or the children are not being identified in order to go into those classes? So without question, that is something that we need to take a look at and absolutely remedy, whether it is an expansion of program, it is an expansion of teachers to address the program or to teach those classes, or it's figuring out systemically why they are not being moved into those classes from their schools. We shouldn't be here. That is a tragic number. That shouldn't exist, and we need to fix that.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca, your comments.
So one thing that I've learned during all of this is the importance of equity. Equity in materials, equity in outreach, equity in supports, and equity in opportunities. A couple of things that we really need to continue to focus on: universal screening, and the expansion of seats in our special programs, as well as ensuring that every school has a rigorous curriculum with advanced opportunities for every student. You shouldn't have to be part of a special program in order to get the advanced educational experience that our students need. And we need to have high expectations for everyone. And that comes from a lot of training and professional development opportunities. And we need to really just focus on identifying each individual child as an individual and looking at what their needs are to make them be more successful.
Okay, thank you. We move to District 4, Shebra.
Sure. I have a deep commitment to equity and excellence, which is why I fully supported the equity and achievement framework that we currently have in Montgomery County, where we are disaggregating our data by race and poverty to really get to, are our students learning? How do we know? If so, what are we going to do about it if they're not learning? And to take an even deeper dive, to go to the very next level, what the system is doing currently is we are undergoing an anti-racist audit, and that's in conjunction with the curriculum office along with the equity initiatives unit, where we're really trying to make certain that we're taking an even deeper dive to see, how are our students learning by subgroups, and trying to make certain that we're making a difference and that they're not continuing to be impacted with the quality of education that they're receiving here in Montgomery County. So we deeply believe that all means all, and we want to do well for the students that we haven't done well for in the past. Thank you.
Okay, also District 4, Steve, please.
Yeah, that's a very unfortunate statistic. It bothers me and probably bothers a lot of people to hear that, as to the fact that we have several kids who are not reading at the level they should be. And you think, how does that happen in schools with a system like ours, are doing much better to address these issues? I can see that. We do have the universal screening to find kids before. No, don't make them find you. We'll find them. And I think the expansion of special programs to more schools, if you don't even know about a program in a school halfway across the county, you'll never be involved in it. If it's at your school, like, oh wow, that's something I can be more interested. So I think there's a lot of ways to address that issue, and it's obviously something that's not acceptable when the percentages are like that. So it's something that we are working on, and I've seen it been worked on by this board, but we can continue to do that further in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sunil?
What is really interesting to me about this question is that this is not something new. This has been in Montgomery County since 1996. There was a Harvard study actually that identified achievement gap as a problem in the school system. So really, if this has persisted for this long, why? It's not only why it exists today, but why has it persisted? And I think part of the reason goes back to the governance gap that I talked about in just a minute ago, which is that there is a dependence on the staff to provide options. Very narrowly in the short term, I would try to go and fix the advising, help and retrain our counselors who do the advising and placement. And that would be the way that I would approach this most immediately. But in the long term, we have to fix resource allocation. We have to do a lot of things that, there's no one single thing that you do.
Right. All right. And Lynn Harris, please.
MCPS has been looking at getting every student through Algebra 1 by 8th grade for years now. My son, who is now a senior, was placed in algebra as a 7th grader. If we want to know, first and foremost, why students of color aren't participating and being enrolled in algebra in the 7th grade, the first place that we need to go is to the students. We've got at least 6 years worth of students that we can ask about their experience of middle school, their experience of their math curriculum in middle school, the offerings that they were provided, and what they would have wanted versus what they were provided. We need to make sure that the personal is ab initio taken out of this equation. Every student who's eligible should be automatically enrolled in algebra in the 7th grade, and then the students should be consulted so that they are the ones making the decision about what.
Thank you. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next question. Progress in closing the opportunity gap for Black, Brown, and low-income students requires accountability. How do you propose that the Board of Education require meaningful accountability to improve outcomes for underserved students? What actions would you take to promote meaningful accountability? And we'll start with District 4, Steve.
Meaningful accountability. That's the only kind of accountability I think that should be out there is the meaningful kind. That makes sense. But this is something that has been an issue for a long time, and it's something everyone says, my goal is to close the achievement gap. And there's really no one answer to do it, but there are several things the board can do to make sure that students are presented the best opportunity and given the best, put in the best situation to achieve and do the best that they can. That comes with retaining teachers. I think we have a problem doing that in Montgomery County, that we want to make sure our teachers have some individuality and are not overwhelmed by administration. And I think something I mentioned before is the expansion of programs to more schools, so that when students have more opportunities at a school, and if they hopefully have the best teachers there with them, that gives them the best chance to achieve. And that's what we can hope for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Shebra, District 4.
Sure. The board, around this time last year, we got our last report where we did a resource allocation study, trying to really look at how are we spending our money? How are we allocating the resources in terms of the people in the school buildings, and how are we allocating our time to each of our students? We want to take a really deep dive. We do believe, my colleagues and I, in supporting this external consultant that did this work, we believe that every child should be able to reach his or her full potential, and they can only do that when they have access. And so we really are taking a look at what's happening at each of our schools so that we can get down to each individual student to see when they're not learning, why is that? So I will say that the board has spent an enormous amount of time trying to ensure that every child is able to be successful while they're here in Montgomery County Public Schools.
Okay, thank you. And now Lynn at large.
Yeah, I'm a public health person, and I really do believe that our school system could learn a lot by embracing the formative evaluative tools that we use in public health to make sure that when we're rolling out an initiative, we are looking at how well we're doing as we go and not waiting until the end to look backwards and say, how did we do? So meaningful accountability means that we need to be having an ongoing conversation with the students, their families, the teachers, and the administrators in our schools, and evaluating the opportunities provided to our students, evaluating how well they're performing in those opportunities, and then having a very real conversation that involves students. Too many decisions about students, not enough decisions with students, to figure out what supports would be required to help them achieve better, and listen to them as well as to our educational expertise when we decide how to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Sunil?
Yeah, one more time, I think the sort of this issue, we've had this issue for a long time. If you look, first of all, we have not funded adequately some of the things that we were doing before. So there is a County Council Office of Legislative Oversight report that shows, for example, that we are underfunding English language learners, right? Between 2014 and 2018, those are the latest figures available, right? And so I think there is there are a number of things we could do. So among the things that I think we have to ensure is rebalancing our resources and how we allocate them. And to the extent that's happening, that's a good idea. I think as an ongoing thing, we do our map testing early, but those results are often not available later on. So there are things that can be done in the immediate as well.
Thank you. We'll move to District 2, Rebecca.
Thank you. Accountability, in my opinion, needs to be at every level, from the board all the way down to the students. We need to hire, support, and retain the best staff that we possibly can. We need to utilize our evidence of learning and performance matters data. And we must absolutely ensure that there's an equitable and concerted amounts of time spent on every student for evaluating their future and preparing them for that future. It's imperative that we don't make assumptions and that we help students choose a path that works for them, which is a different pathway for every kid potentially, but gives them hope for the future and a direction that they can see themselves going in. And then we need to support them to get there. And we need to make sure that we are providing the professional development for our staff to be able to help them do that. I think time getting to know children and what it is that brings them hope and passion is going to be very important.
Okay. And Michael, please.
So accountability also needs to be measurable. It's one of the reasons why management love the time clock, because it is an absolute concrete thing that you can say, yes, you're on time, yes, you're early, or yes, you're late. So if you don't have something that's measurable, you can't achieve the goal. You don't know if you got there. So one of the things that we have to do is have measurable. This allows the board to sit down with the superintendent and say, where are we progressing? How far are we along? Are we at our goal, or are we still short? So no matter where you're at in an accountability structure, there have to be measurable goals that are set just to tell you if you're progressing or not. We can say we want to close the achievement gap, or we can say we want to increase the number of students in Algebra 1. One is a very vague concept. The other is measurable. We know what the percentages are, and we know what students need to go. So really, everyone needs to kind of come together in order to clear the definition on what exactly it is we're trying to achieve, and then put a measurable goal in place that will allow us to know if we're getting there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next question. I'm warning you now, it'll be only a 30-second answer. You're getting more experience with your answers. So what approaches do you support to assure that schools serving large number of low-income students of color have effective and diverse teachers and administrators and a diverse set of programs? So what approaches do you support for these students? We'll start with at-large Sunil.
So I've been thinking about this a lot, actually. So one of the things that I really think is that we ask that we should be able to hire more minority staff and make us, teachers and staff more diverse. But the problem is, how do we go to a minority college student and say, oh, come join the profession of teaching, when the profession of teaching is in decline? I think, first of all, we have to fix and elevate the profession of teaching in order to be able to attract, the best candidates to it.
Okay, thank you. Lynn.
Yeah, I think the evidence is absolutely clear. What we need to do is make sure we have the most qualified and successful educators and the most successful and accomplished administrators in the schools in which we have the most struggling students. And I think MCPS needs to absolutely look to coming up with a system where we can incentivize the highest performing teachers and administrators to move into our most struggling schools. And we also need to look at growing our own school of educators out of our highly functional student population.
Okay, Michael, District 2.
Hi, I was a male elementary school teacher, which makes me a minority. It's actually a very rare occurrence. And I've served as a consultant in various ways to talk about what it is that attracted me as a male to elementary school teaching and how to actually get other men to come into the profession. And it's actually not that hard. There's a lot of things about the profession that are actually attractive. The problem is that there's some barriers in the way from preconceived notions. So one of the things we have to do is identify those elements and then get past them to attract teachers in.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca.
So the short answer would be I support any and all initiatives to try and do what we can for this approaches. We need to offer incentives that provide not just higher income wages, but also better quality of life for our staff, to encourage them to go to those schools, stay at those schools, and support our students. We need to grow our own teachers. That's something I've been working very closely with MCPS on for years now, trying to come up with programs that will help do that.
Okay, thank you. Shebra.
Sure, thank you. I support what we currently do, out of box thinking. We are on various social media platforms trying to recruit teachers of diverse backgrounds. When we were not in a virtual world, we were having regular career fairs. I support that we have done some out of the box thinking where I came with HR to Busboys and Poets to talk with educators from all over to come and hear on an informal level about our school system. So we've done some really great things and we need to continue to do more.
Thank you. And Steve.
So we have 166,000 potential teachers right in our schools right now. We have to teach these kids, look how cool it is to be a teacher. Look what you can do to make other children learn. And if that's something that can be done with a program, career fairs, anything to show students in our schools, we have so many diverse students in our schools who could make great teachers. We do have to show them the opportunities out there. It exists. It's a great career and something that many should want to do.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll look at virtual learning. We'll go back to 60-second answers. MCPS and the nation are undergoing an unplanned national experiment in virtual learning. What have you learned from this unprecedented situation that you would like to see MCPS continue to do, even after the students are back in buildings for classes? So what have you learned in this situation? We'll start with District 2, Rebecca.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm gonna, again, mention that one of the things we've learned is the importance of equity. And we've worked hard to ensure that every student has access to Wi-Fi and technology needed for them to be successful. We need to continue to work on that. What I would like to continue as we go back into our buildings eventually is that we can use what we've learned to expand access and opportunities that the online learning provides for all students. My vision for the future is every student will have access to every class, every area of interest, and every curriculum offering, regardless of where their home school is. And I think that this is something that has provided us the opportunity to look at ways that we can do that and involve things like attendance or incorporate things like attendance and other concerns that have come up in the past.
Okay, Steve, 60 seconds.
Okay. Well, a lot of companies have learned that virtual situations like mine here at the radio station, I'm like the only one in this building. After this is over, they're going to probably cut half of this building off because we don't really need it anymore. It works great for businesses, for having a smaller footprint that way. It doesn't work that great for education. As you can see, I've tried to put my virtual background in like the other five candidates here. I couldn't because it was so blurry, it wasn't working. That's why I'm not with that thing. So virtual situations have their limits. And it's showed us how great in-person learning is. You don't know how good it is until you lose it for a lot of things. So we've seen that elementary school, maybe middle school students, certainly special education students are really suffering with virtual education. It's just not a way to function long-term. What we've done in the short term has been great. We've done as good as can be expected, but it's something that hopefully will end soon for all of us.
Okay, thank you. Shebra.
Sure. I think one thing that we've learned is that our teachers are very much needed. Many parents have had to become teachers during this virtual learning process. And I think that I hope that we've been able to elevate and highlight how much our teachers do. We've learned, so I'll say this, I hope we've been able to show the community that although this is something that we could not have foreseen, that we could not have predicted, that we want to be in person, that we have changed how public school is teaching our kids, and we've done it in a short period of time. We have some hardworking individuals throughout Montgomery County Public Schools, our supporting staff, our teachers, our administrators, and they're continuing to engage our students who are disengaged. They want to be able to make sure that every student is connecting. We've learned that everybody believes that education is everybody's business, and we've had so many community partners want to help take part in helping support our students as we go through this virtual learning process.
Thank you. Lynn, please.
I can say as an MCPS teacher, one of the things that I know has come out of this is being forced, maybe out of your comfort zone, to learn new tools to provide really engaging instruction to your students when in whatever circumstance you find yourself. It's been a little bit complicated that some of us are learning, all of us are learning a brand new data system as we are also adapting to new teaching methods and new teaching tools. I think another thing that we are learning is perhaps a way to provide far more flexible academic supports for some students and far more flexible academic scheduling for some students, because learning virtually does provide an opportunity when you're asynchronous for students to engage in their learning when it suits their schedules best. And especially in our upper grades, we do have some students who have other time pressures and family pressures, and that is appreciated.
Okay, and Sunil.
So I have been teaching online for 7 years, maybe, I think, if even perhaps longer, but at least for 7 years. And what I've learned from this episode in MCPS is not something different from what I knew before, which is that first, online education works for some students, and it doesn't work for many others. So this bimodality problem has to be resolved if we are going to go forward with any kind of online learning. Secondly, I think the importance of teachers is paramount, right? That's become evident. But it is important to also recognize that teachers have not had the support that they needed. So while many teachers have stepped right up and done incredibly well, right? They've also had lots of stressors that they have had to deal with. So those are my lessons from going forward.
Okay, thank you. One more question about virtual learning. Again, 60 seconds. The groups of students who receive ESOL, that's English for Speakers of Other Languages, and special education services have been particularly challenged by distance learning. What strategies do you think MCPS should focus on to help these particular students recover from their learning losses during this period of time? We'll start now with Shebra from District 4.
Sure. So you have heard that while we've been able to provide virtual learning for our students, that for some of them, our students, it has not been as successful as we would have liked. But what we have done is made certain that we've been able to try to close the gaps. We've created student wellness teams that we did not do this before. So the student wellness teams consist of a counselor, a pupil personnel worker, a parent community coordinator, of course, the administrator in the building, the teacher, and they're trying to make certain that we can send out supports to the families and to the students that they may be lacking or that they may not know that the resources exist. So that's something that we have done during this virtual learning process and that we will continue to do going forward. So I just wanted to share that was one of some of the things, one of the many things that MCPS is doing during this virtual learning to help our most vulnerable students.
Okay, let's move to Steve.
So of all the downfalls of virtual learning, the biggest, one of the biggest problems I see is that kids who were behind before fall more behind. It affects everyone negatively, but those who were in trouble before are going to have a harder time catching up now. And that's because perhaps they don't have internet that others have. Perhaps it's because they have 3 other kids in the same room with them that other students don't. Perhaps it's because their parents have to go in person to work and have to put them somewhere else during the day. These are all things that thousands of kids and parents have had to deal with because of virtual learning. This is magnified for kids in ESOL and special education as well. So I think it's something that is disproportionately affecting the people who were already hurt, and something that's a very sad situation, and something we could hopefully bring them back first if we start bringing people back.
Thank you. Sunil?
Thank you. So it is clear that for some special education students and some and many English language learning students, ESOL students, online learning has not worked. And so we have to do outreach to them, of course, but also we have to be planning to bring back those students safely. I think we are talking about bringing them back, but we are not seeing much about how we are going to do this safely. I think that is the critical point right now, that we need a plan. We need some clear ideas about how to bring them back safely. Now understand, special ed students means 19,000 students. ELL students means about 16,000 students. So that's 35,000 students. You're not going to bring them all back together. So who's going to be returned first? So those kinds of questions have to be answered before we set a date.
Okay, thank you. And Lynn, please.
Yeah, I think we have to be absolutely honest that the longer we remain purely virtual, the more students are going to suffer irreparable and perhaps irreplaceable lifetime learning loss, especially our youngest learners, especially our students with special needs. And I would speak also as a CTE instructor in a highly hands-on course in Montgomery County. We can't deliver what we've promised to our students if we can't get them into our skills labs and into our construction clusters, at least periodically in small cohorts. One of the things that I did over the summer as part of a curriculum review team for the medical science program in MCPS was draft a CDC compliant plus plan to bring our students in small cohorts safely for periodic skills lab instruction. There are ways to bring small groups in periodically for in-person instruction. The science is there. We have to commit to it.
Okay, thank you. And Michael, I must say that I failed to recognize you for the previous question, also on virtual learning, so that we will give you 2 60-second periods to answer both questions. The most recent one that everyone's answering is about the ESOL and special education services students. And the previous one was, what would you like to see that MCPS continue to do after the students are back in buildings for classes? Thank you.
Thank you. So in addressing the what would I like to see, this is that moment where I'm glad, honestly, that kids can't vote, because one of the biggest problems that we have in public education is summer slide. So I think we've demonstrated that we can actually put together a program that doesn't just deliver education, but delivers meals as well. And food is incredibly important. So we've put that system now in place. Now we have a system that for those 2.5 months where kids are not in a classroom, that doesn't mean that the education stops. And we can actually have programs and accessibility that are built in now that will actually allow students to stay at level, if not advance, through the summer, because we can have courses and programs and other things available to them. So we've demonstrated the possibility. Now the question becomes the execution and how we're going to go about doing it. With regard to ESL, ELL, and special needs students, one of the valuable things about having been a classroom teacher is that I was an inclusion teacher. So I'm well used to, I write lesson plans, and then I sit down with the special education teachers and we modify the plans student by student. It's a process that is normal and in part of education. It's what happens within a classroom in a building. So some of that can be done with regard to online learning. But again, the problem is that live classroom instruction is a unique set of skills. Online content delivery is a unique set of skills. What we did not do, or we're expecting our teachers to do, is just because they have teacher in the title, now all of a sudden they can do both. And they're finding out that it's not the same. So we need training for teachers in order to do content delivery online, but we especially need training for those special education students. But the reality, quite frankly, is they need live in-person instruction. Online is just not designed for special education at any level. And we're doing a stopgap in a crisis situation, but we've got to get back. Thank you.
Thank you. And Rebecca.
So thank you for the question. I will agree that, we need to do everything we can to provide in-person opportunities for our students in special education, particularly as soon as we can. But there are other things that we need to do as well. I will agree with my colleagues here. We need to do a lot of training. We need to continue to provide supports for our teachers and our families in all languages. So parent supports and training, tutoring, offering more opportunities for intervention groups with support staff. In the past, I've gone into ESOL classrooms and asked them, the students, some of the things like, what would be the one thing that would help you be the most successful? And inevitably, help with homework in their language and communication with their families are among the top. Another thing that we heard today is expanding the programs like the graduation intervention programs offered at Gaithersburg High School.
Okay, thank you. Now let's go to financing of education. The Kirwan Commission report, that study of education in Maryland, made it clear that additional funding of education is imperative. How would you go about securing additional resources that are needed for education in Montgomery County, particularly in light of the current charter restrictions on the ability to raise revenue from the property tax and also state law restrictions on the income tax rate? There are 60 seconds for your answer, and we'll begin with Lynn.
Yeah, very short answer, yes on A, no on B, if you're looking at your ballot. I think we need to be really, really pragmatic. And when we're looking at revenue generation in the county, we need to foreclose any proposal that would stop our ability to raise revenue as we grow as a county, which is part of what question B would do, essentially legally requiring our county to disintegrate before our eyes by capping revenue, despite whatever our growth happens to be. We need to really be looking too at what it means to have an adequate public facilities ordinance when we aren't really looking at whether or not our facilities are adequate. And then we need to make sure that as we grow in a way that is cognizant of where we're generating our students and putting pressures on our infrastructure, and we fund where we need to and not where we don't.
Okay. Also at large, Sunil.
So I'm almost campaigning as hard for question A as I am campaigning for this, for the at-large seat. I do not support question B. It is a restrictive question that will really hamper a proper funding of education in the county. Now, having said that, I'm looking forward to working with our delegates to make sure that we get more money from the state, and hopefully that'll come. But I also want to talk about sort of the here and now, right? Here and now, even though we have a real sort of underfunding issue, and we have a rainy day fund in the county that is supposed to support exactly these kinds of situations. It's pouring now. So let's use some of that rainy day fund to fund our schools.
Thank you. Rebecca, in District 2.
Thank you. So I too agree that we need to increase funding for our schools if it's needed. I also, however, believe that we need to be continually looking closely at the return on the investments that we have made and continue to make. I think that priorities should be based on where we see the greatest result. And then I think frequently that sells itself to the public and to the council and the state. And I think that we need to continue to evaluate what we're doing with our resources so that the public can have confidence in the way that we're spending our money to make sure that they have the support. So we have their support behind us when we go make that ask.
Okay, thank you. And Michael.
So I have to take the lawyer hat off and put the MBA one on. As part of my business program, I did actually do some research and a paper into alternative funding for public education. In the Midwest, where they don't have enough of a tax base, there are a number of models that have popped up that don't rely on taxes in order to fund public education. These are valid models. They absolutely work. They are separated so that they are contracted. They are done very, very well. And very effectively and efficiently. So what you're not doing is constantly going to businesses or private citizens and saying, we're going to start raising your tax rate up. These public education institutions and boards of education are saying, we are going to find an alternative method in order to bring the funds in that we need, particularly in communities where you have an older population that look at the school budget and say, no, I'm 3 generations out from, I'm not funding this. So you really force them into a situation where there's not enough funds, and they've come up with these incredibly creative and wonderful ways of funding it. And we need to look at those models.
Thank you. Steve Solomon, District 4.
Okay, well, there's 2 things everyone can agree on. We all want more money for schools, and none of us want to pay more taxes. So how do we find a way to mesh those 2 things to make our schools as well funded as possible? So I have to have confidence in our county council and county executive to grow our county. As Montgomery County gets more money, so does the education budget, and we've done a lot of things to further us towards that. There was a long time when Montgomery County was losing businesses, when we were really stagnating economically. So that's something that we have to solve, and state money as well. I'll happily talk to all 24 Montgomery County delegates in the House to see what they can do to get us more money. But something Rebecca said is something I believe too, that we have to be results oriented with our spending. We can't say we need more money for this and then say, really? Well, did it work? Did that program become efficient? So that's something we need to do, is look back on how we spent and see if there was the right way of spending as well.
Thank you. And Shebra, District 4.
Sure, thank you for that question. Having served as the president the past 2 years and just my advocacy work period, I've built some really great relationships with our state elected officials as well as our local government. So as the president, I've gone before the I've gone to Annapolis to speak in support of the Kern Commission, as well as worked really closely with our county council members, speaking about, what we need. The good news is that we have county council members who believe in a quality public education. Some have kids in the school system. Some have kids that have graduated. So we have really great relationships, and talking to them and talking about the needs, and they understand that. And I'll also say Montgomery County Public Schools has done a great job at, extending our partnership. The Children's Opportunity Fund is another opportunity for us to work with private organizations to help support our school system as well. So we just need to take advantage of all avenues to make certain that we can continue to make our school system successful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to go into more questions, but only 30-second answers. So shorter answers. And this question is on curriculum. Given the concerns many families have with excessive time that their children spend on screens, especially now with virtual learning, what priority would you give to reviewing how technology is used in the MCPS curriculum and assessing its values compared to other teaching tools such as textbooks once we're back to in-person learning? So priorities for reviewing how technology is used. And we'll start with District 2, Michael.
So if you're teaching technology, clearly technology is the tool to utilize. So if we're teaching coding, most of it should be spent on the computer. But, you know, the old saying, you know, I see and I forget, I hear and I understand, I do and I learn. Most lessons should have some kind of physical interactive component, if not the primary. I'm a constructivist by training, not a traditional teacher. So almost everything I do is real life, constructed, physical, hands-on, and applicable to the lesson that you're doing. So technology, great if you're learning technology.
Okay. Rebecca.
So I think that, of course, should be a top priority that when we go back into the buildings or to in-person learning, that it should be a top priority that we review and look at what we've been doing while we've been working strictly virtual, how things have gone and where we can make a difference. You know, I agree. Hands-on learning, there is nothing better than that, in my opinion. When you do things, when you're able to talk things out and not be looking and attached to a screen and working independently only, that's the best way. But I do think it's important that since we've had this opportunity to be doing this virtual work, to look at ways that we can make it, incorporate it for the best of what we've seen and get rid of what has not worked.
Okay, thank you. Shebra, District 4.
Sure, thank you. So back in 2019, I believe it was February, the board adopted a new curriculum, benchmark for English and Eureka Math. And so what we made certain of is that we did a stakeholder engagement to take a look at our curriculum, and we offered both hard materials as well as access to technology. We know that different students work well depending on the material, so we have a variety of both as well as parent resources so that our parents can be able to support their kids.
Okay, and Steve.
So I remember back in school and 30 years ago when I was in school, I think typing was the most advanced of technology that we learned when we were all taking classes. So that's changed dramatically in terms of how to learn and how kids are learning today. So as Shebra said, the opportunities and choice for kids and for their parents is something that we should definitely be pushing. Some kids can be coding at 8. I don't know how to do that. And some kids don't want to code at all. So the different choices in curriculum is something that's very important to me too.
Okay, thank you. Sunil?
Just because you have a Chromebook doesn't mean that you have to use it all the time. Just because you have a textbook doesn't mean you will use it all the time, right? So I think it is how you use it. If you look at what we are doing at virtual learning right now in the fall, we are forcing kids to sit in front of computers for 4 hours in a day. And that need not have happened. So I think a big part of this question is how we use the instrument in our hand, not just, the instrument itself.
Okay, thank you. And Lynn?
Yeah, once we can get back to a model of instruction that isn't so purely driven by requirements to be virtual, the question of the level of technology in a classroom needs to be driven by the evidence and what works with the developing student brain. I think differing levels of technology are appropriate for different age groups, but also the content. What I teach, highly hands-on. I need to be working with my students on skills. But we can't get away from the almighty book.
Okay, thank you. For the next question, it'll be a show of hands. If you agree, raise your hands. If you do not agree, do not raise your hand. This is on gender issues. MCPS guidelines and regulations make it very clear that the Board of Education, in quotes, expects all students and staff to conduct themselves in a manner that demonstrates mutual respect without regard to an individual's actual or perceived personal characteristics, such as gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, and family or parental status. Do you agree with these rules? If you do, raise your hands. And if you don't, do not raise your hand. Okay, thank you very much. Everybody saw that. Okay, the next two questions are also 30 seconds. During virtual learning, again, continuing on gender issues, during virtual learning, transgender students have been inadvertently outed because their Zoom screens display their birth names instead of their chosen names. What would you do to improve the communication process so that students can safely express their gender identity? Okay, we'll start with Steve this time.
Well, much like in this Zoom session, I can click on my name and rename it to whatever I want. So I would think that we should give students the opportunity to put their name however they want it up on their virtual screen. So I could go here. Hey, hi, it's Steve. There we go. You know, so I think that's something we could do that we would obviously solve this problem, I think.
Okay, thank you. Shebra?
Sure, I would support having students be able to be identified the way that they feel the most comfortable. If I'm not mistaken, when we take their information, we do ask how they want to be identified. So if nothing more, to match up the records that we have to what the students and their parents have submitted.
Okay, Lynn, please.
Yeah, this has been a huge issue for the LGBTQ students and advocates and allies. We need to make sure that we are honoring students and their gender identities and not creating hurdles in front of them when they want to be known by the identity with which they feel most comfortable. And I know in my own class every day before my students even log on, I click the switch and let them identify themselves.
Thank you. Sunil?
I'm not sure this is a communication failure. Really, it's a technology management failure. I mean, as Shebra pointed out, it's clear that the school system has self-identifying names. It was just a matter of not being able to match it. I'm not sure, what went wrong. And as a board member, I will look into that kind of thing rather than sort of make excuses for those that made that mistake.
Thank you. Rebecca, please.
Sure. Well, thank you for the question. As chair of the Special Populations Committee, this is something that I've worked very closely with the LGBTQ plus community and the families and students on. We absolutely need to be supportive of all students be able to gender identify themselves in whatever way makes them the most comfortable. We need to make sure that the technology is supportive of that and allows students to be able to identify themselves in the way that they feel comfortable. And we need to let teachers know how every student prefers to be identified so that they can follow through with that.
Okay, and Michael.
It's a little bit disturbing, and quite frankly, it's unforgivable that someone has identified themselves in a way, and then the system failed at some point. And whether it was a paperwork issue, an interview, something wasn't entered into the system, that's demeaning. I mean, it's damaging to that individual and permanent. That is now a memory they will always have, and having to deal in the room. So quite frankly, we should have something in place that prevents that, even the possibility from occurring. Whether it's the ability to type a name into the screen or making sure the back system doesn't have poor information.
Okay, thank you. Here's another question, 30 seconds as well. Some people have expressed concern that the board has too many closed sessions. What criteria should the Board of Education use for having closed sessions? And we'll start with Sunil.
I think closed sessions have to deal with personnel matters. It has to do with sensitive matters, probably, things with that have legal implications. I also think that, there can be in certain circumstances, certain meetings that that the board can deliberate. I think a bunch of this has to do really with the board having its own staff. I think if the board were to have its staff, I think a lot of these things would become much easier and they could be in open session.
Okay, thank you. Lynn?
Yeah, a lot of us that have been advocating in MCPS for years have seen the fact that we are in a place where we have a crisis of trust between MCPS and our school communities. And a lot of that is related to the lack of transparency. For that reason, if no other, I would very strongly suggest that the board never meet in closed session unless they are talking specifically about personnel issues or issues that would reveal student privacy.
Thank you. Michael? Michael Fryer? Oh. Michael's screen has frozen, so I'll move to...
Yeah, we seem to have lost Michael, so move on.
Okay, so I'll move to Rebecca, please.
Here's Mike again.
Oh,
Oh,
I'm back.
Michael, sorry.
So I serve on a couple of different boards, and I've worked with boards of education, and this is kind of where the issue, honestly, at the end of the day, is FERPA. All boards deal with personnel matters, all boards deal with confidential matters, but in the education world, FERPA is a particularly brutal rule. No information, no identifying information can go out. So if you're dealing with a lot of internal stuff, you have to go into a private session to discuss, and then policies may come out of that. In a private session, no voting, this may not be known, but no voting can take place. So really, I think identifying that there is something going on is a great way to communicate and build trust.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca?
So I agree with my colleagues here in the sense that communication has been, I think, and trust has been a bit of a problem, and that's where communication would make a big difference. Having staff would help in terms of being able to get together and listen to things from the superintendent that we might want information about later going forward before our meetings. But there are strict guidelines that we adhere to, and we should never be getting together in person or in public when we're talking about personnel matters or student matters or things of confidential nature.
Thank you. Shebra?
Sure, thank you. I don't think I need 30 seconds. Currently, as the board president and serving on the board for the past 4 years, we use closed session for personnel matters. I don't know if everyone knows, but as a board member, we have a quasi-judicial role. And so that's what we're doing. We are handling personnel and student matters as we are in closed session.
Thank you. And Steve?
Yeah, definitely. You don't want to be airing anything about private issues in public. It just doesn't make sense. And as was said also, you see how the county council works. They have committee and they have full meetings every Tuesday, and they have staffs of 4 or 5 each with large budgets. So they're able to do those kind of things. And they're on TV if you want to watch them, as are the board public meetings. So those are some things that they're just not able to do for the board in feasibility. But yes, the private sessions should stay private.
Okay, thank you. All right, one last question. These are questions I said from the public. This is on school environment. What are 2 steps that MCPS should take to reduce its carbon footprint? 2 ideas that MCPS should take to reduce its carbon footprint. We'll start with Rebecca first this time.
So I'm a huge advocate for the solar panels on all of our roofs and buildings whenever absolutely possible. I also went and toured the recycling program that our students have at 2 of our schools. And I would like to see us expand that into every one of our schools and really help grow the composting and recycling programs there.
Okay, thank you. Steve, can you give us 2 steps? Or 2 ideas?
Sure. I think that better utilization of space is something that we can work on. We can have more multi-use facilities. I know the idea in Poolsville is to have their new high school be this exact thing. So it's a destination in the city, not just the school, but also a rec center. Health can go on there too. And obviously solar panels. Any new construction should be a net zero kind of place, and it's something other places do. And perhaps we can have better bidding on our construction contracts as well.
Okay, thank you. Shebra.
Sure. So two things. I think it was stated, we definitely want to make certain that we're energy efficient in our buildings as we are adding on to our current schools and building new schools. But prior to COVID-19, one of the things that MCPS was in the midst of trying to do was have electric buses. But because of COVID-19, our request for proposal got held up, and so we weren't able to do that, so it was on hold. But that's one of the things that we want to be able to try to do here in Montgomery County Public Schools.
Okay, thank you.
Michael.
You forgot me again.
I did. You know, I'm sorry, Michael. I misspoke again. So Michael, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Rebecca. So you took one of mine, which is electric buses. My dad was actually a traffic systems engineer, and it's a huge thing of his. So I'll do greening roofs and retrofit. We really need to take buildings that exist and green the roofs, which is, you actually get soil, you grow plants and trees. It absorbs water, all kinds of positive aspects to that. And the second is we need to break the traditional construction design mold on our buildings and actually build buildings that are far more efficient. That squared off brick kind of traditional way we go, we got to get rid of it. We've got to move on with different design.
Okay, thank you. Now I am embarrassed to say, Shebra, did I already ask you about the environment? Yes, okay. Sorry. So Lynn, it's your turn.
Well, so many things that MCPS could do to reduce our carbon footprint, and student groups actually are really leading the way on creative and innovative ways we could be doing this work, like MoCo Students on Climate. Electric buses, absolutely, looking at every single MCPS property for its appropriateness for installing solar. We could commit to buying all of our energy from green sources. We need to empower our school energy and recycling team to make binding recommendations for every school to reduce its carbon footprint. We can do it.
Thank you. And Sunil.
So the most impactful things would be rooftop solar and electric buses. And the question really is, we just have, I think, 30 odd schools that have, perhaps even lesser actually, now that I think about it, fewer schools that have rooftop solar, which is really sad. I have been working with the Montgomery County Faith Alliance folks there and advocating for MCPS to adopt these two measures. And I think, and we have found some commercial funding opportunities to be able to do that.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll go into 4 questions from the students, and they're equally 30-second questions. And because I have you going in different order, I am sorry that I have missed you twice, Michael. Okay, so here's the first question from the students. What measures would you take to ensure that the children of Montgomery County engage in a curriculum that fosters invaluable skills for the future, both socially and practically? We'll start with you, Shebra.
Sure. So I mentioned earlier that we are undergoing an anti-racist audit of our school system. We really want to take a deep dive to make certain that no one student group or school is learning something different. I will also mention that we're taking a look under our social studies instructional specialists at how we teach our history and expanding upon that. We've done a great job in 8th grade and 9th grade, and we're moving to our high school areas to not make it an elective, but make it something that everyone is learning.
Thank you. Steve.
Well, if you go to my website, votestevesolomon.com, you'll see that the top issue I have is to make our real world education happen in Montgomery County. I think that we want practical education for our students. I learned how to be a carpenter, and while I was struggling to get into radio, that's the job that paid my bills for many years. So that's something I think a lot of students can identify with. There's plenty of jobs, they are well paying. So real world education is something I very much stress for MCPS.
Thank you. Sunil.
A number of things. We need to make sure that we have curriculum diversity, and we have to do that, make sure that there's staff diversity as well. Second, we have to be mindful of, we have to provide more opportunities for hands-on learning so that students that want to go in a different direction can do that. And third, we have to really focus on content education. I think in some ways we are focused too much on skill building. My fourth grader learned about hypothesis. I don't know how useful that is for her for a number of years.
Okay, thank you. And Lynn.
Well, I love that we're doing student questions from students, and I would turn this around a little bit and say, we need to make sure that the pragmatic learning opportunities that we're providing and the real world learning opportunities we're providing to students are ones in which they see value. So it's an ongoing question in MCPS. Does demand drive curriculum, or does curriculum drive demand? And we need to make sure that we are providing the opportunity for students to express the curriculum they want, and we meet those demands.
Thank you. Michael.
So this is one of the things I love about thematic and magnet programs, which is why they need to be expanded, is they actually provide real world application for what is being learned. So math is unfortunately one that gets picked on, and you have these hypothetical examples, and you have this, you know, where is the actual practical real world? But when you're in thematic and you're in magnet programs, all the stuff that you're learning applies to that theme or that magnet program. So you actually have and are learning real world application for what's going on. So your history, your social studies, your language arts, your math is all themed, or it's magnets to that magnet theme.
Thank you. And Rebecca.
So thanks. There's a lot of aspects to this. We need to be not just having CTE options, but we need to be making sure students are aware of them. I was talking to a principal earlier today who was saying that he's putting together town hall meetings for students at lunch to provide feedback on what is real and what is happening and what it is that they are experiencing and want to know about, and taking those suggestions. Life skills like balancing a checkbook, you know, the economy, and social skills for better soft people skills, because, you know, technology is threatening all of that stuff. So
thank you. Okay, the second question from the students: how will students transition back to in-person learning if COVID cases slow down? What are your suggestions for how students should transition back? And we'll start with Lynn.
Thanks. First of all, I think that there are thousands of school systems all around the world that have reopened during the time of COVID, which means there's a lot of evidence for us to be looking at and gathering when we start making decisions about what MCPS is going to do when it comes time to reopen. As a public health person, I'm convinced that there's no way that we can go back completely all at once. We're going to have to come up with a hybrid model that reduces the pressures on gathering in our public spaces in our schools and allows us to fully cohort and work with our public health department.
Thank you. Sunil?
So I have said that we have to honor individual family choices and individual teacher and staff choices. We have to first find out which students and which families are willing to send their children back. We have to find out which teachers and staff are willing to go back and work around those things. We also need to make sure that we emphasize equity and bring back those students that are most impacted, those not able to connect, and those that get small group instruction.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca.
This is a big one. So I agree, we need to be able to provide choice for families. I think that we need to be working with the continue working with the health department we currently are. We need to look at other areas and see what's working because other school systems are ahead of us on this. And we need to make sure that we are providing the resources that are needed for the safety of our staff and not expecting that they're going to manage that on their own. And I think, I've proposed a proposal for looking at a hybrid model that would bring in our youngest and most vulnerable first.
Okay, thank you. Michael.
So at some point, we're going to be back to regular day programs. And I think what we need to do first is identifying what is the intervening event that's going to occur that is actually going to get us back into normal, for lack of a better word, and that is probably a vaccine. So once we identified that intervening event, we then back up and say, okay, what does the model look like before we have that vaccine, and how are we going to do it? The hybrid model has been highly successful all over the United States. There's I think it's Brown University has actually put up a website that's tracking public education exposure in COVID cases and demonstrating that it's really it's low. So we can get there. The question is just how are we going to learn from others' lessons?
Thank you. And Steve.
Yes, the one good thing about us still being fully in virtual learning is that we have so many examples to see of our neighboring counties in Montgomery or in Maryland, Virginia, of how they're doing it and reopening schools safely. So we can certainly learn from them and then set forth our own reopening plan with details of how to do it. And pleasing every parent, teacher, and student is impossible, but it's something we really have to take into account as the wishes of them as well.
Thank you. Shebra.
Sure. So recently we just sent out a 45-day notice to all of our employees. And the purpose of that was not to say you're coming back in 45 minutes, but it was a joint letter with all of our union presidents and administration to say, let's begin talking about how we're going to bring our students back. So when the time comes upon us that we're not just beginning to plan. So we are talking about that right now with all of our partners to make sure it's a collaborative effort.
Thank you. Okay, next question. What, if anything, will you do to change MCPS's grading policies? What, if anything, will you do to change MCPS's grading policies? And we'll start with you, Michael.
Again, I'm a non-traditional teacher as a constructivist, so grading has always been, I get it. Parents want a letter to come home to get kind of what's going on, but really I'm far more of an assessment person and actually, where are you, what's going on, what's happening? Old school was just grades. We've gone to comments now, and I'll tell you as a teacher, most teachers, it's coded and you just pick the same like 5 codes and you put them in. Pleasure to have in class, great with whatever. It's not enough. We need more in depth to how a child is doing in a classroom.
Thank you. Rebecca.
The first thing I would do is review the standardized testing and the MCPS testing that we are currently implementing and see how that's working for our students and our teachers and able to evaluate what grades we're giving. I think that we need to really look at our quarterly assessments, and we need to have conversations about the percentages versus the rounding ups and downs.
Right. Thank you. Shebra.
Sure. I know people say that we do work groups or work studies to death, but I really think it's important. We have one currently going on. And I want to say it was back when Anaya Tatakonda was our student board member. I particularly remember going to a student town hall and having a discussion. So what we've done with this work group that we currently have looking at our grading system is we have students on the work group. So I think it's really important to make certain that we have their voices included in this process. And the board does a really great job of meeting with our students on, we meet with them twice a year in the spring, in the fall and in the spring, so that we can make certain that as we're doing our priorities that we're hearing their voices and including them.
Thank you. Michael? I'm sorry, sorry. Steve.
Okay. Well, I think grades are a necessary part of schooling. It's not just how you want to measure yourself against somewhere else, but it's how you make sure you're learning what you're being taught. We saw last semester or last year in spring semester with the onset of COVID and the push to virtual learning that we couldn't have grades. And without that, there's a lot of structure that's lost. So it's something that's necessary, but certainly should not be to the detriment of parents and students worrying about it constantly.
Thank you. Sunil?
So obviously I am a teacher. I've been teaching for a long time, and I think grading has a learning role rather than just a purely selection role. But that's a sort of a philosophical idea. But I want to highlight the presentation that was made by Walter Johnson Senior at the last board meeting, where he said that the current system of grading, in light of the education that we are currently providing, are incompatible, and that we should definitely make some changes.
Thank you. Lynn?
Well, as a teacher in MCPS, I can tell you that I really think that the 50% rule is something that is of another era and needs to go. At the same time, I think we really do need to double down on what we say we're doing when it comes to multiple evidences of learning, because students learn differently and they demonstrate their knowledge differently. And the important thing is, are we assessing whatever assessments we're using, how well our students are truly mastering their content, and what opportunities are we giving them to show that they're doing that?
Okay. And the final question from the students and for the evening is, what steps, if any, should be taken to address student mental health issues? Mental health issues. And this time we'll start with you, Steve.
Obviously, I support having as many counselors and mental health professionals as possible in schools. It's something that we've reimagined as a society, really, not just in education, but in all aspects of social life, of how mental health is seen and how it's dealt with for adults and for kids. So definitely something that's needed more of in schools. We didn't have a mental health counselor when I was in school, something that we really have advanced society-wise, and something we need to keep pushing.
Thank you. Shebra?
Sure. Last year, we started our Be Well 365 program, and we continue to enhance that program. But it really is about helping our students to be self-aware and to know who the adults are that they can connect with. And then oftentimes you do know that students feel more comfortable talking to adults, but some feel comfortable talking to peers. So we're just really trying to build up our students so they can be able to help each other, but really be able to have more counselors, school psychologists. We are really trying to make certain that we do that here in the public school system for our students.
Thank you. Yeah. Lynn?
Yeah, I think so many things that we need to do. First of all, we need to make attending to the mental wellness of everybody in our school buildings just the way that we do business. We need to become a fully trauma-informed school system, soup to nuts. That needs to be a priority of the school system. And MCPS needs to make that absolutely clear to the administration of every school. But on the other hand, too, we need to really be tapping into the strengths and the resilience of our students and not pathologizing everything as if it's something that is having a negative impact, because sometimes stress and trauma or stress and difficulties build strengths.
Thank you. Sunil?
Clearly, we need more counselors and mental health professionals. 3 years ago, I founded the annual Mental Health and Wellness Forum that brought together MCPS, the PTAs, the Health and Human Services, and providers and students and families. And we've been doing that every year since. I wish that Be Well 365 had 365 more counselors and mental health workers. I think that would make the real difference.
Thank you. Rebecca?
So this is something that I've been worrying about now more than ever. It is something that I've worked very hard with MCPS staff on, supporting the mental health and wellness of our students. I think the best thing that we can do for our students is peer-to-peer support. So getting them opportunities to support each other and reducing stigma, again, around mental health issues and need. We need more counselors in elementary, especially. We need to stop overloading school psychologists with testing and hire more of those. And we need to be there for each other and ask if we're all okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all for your input on these important questions.
You forgot me again.
And now we've come to time to close the forum with each one of the candidates offering a 1-minute closing statement in the opposite order from the opening. So Rebecca, we're going to start with you and then we'll then go on with Steve and Shebra. So Rebecca, you have 60 seconds.
Okay, we should let Michael answer the last question though. I think we missed him.
Oh, we did.
We did.
Again,
Sorry.
Michael, I must have this blank in front of me. I have number 3 down here. Sorry, Michael.
It's okay. I must be off your screen or something. So the question was what steps, all the steps. This is a very personal, professional issue to me because I have never represented a child client who couldn't have been put on a different path if there'd been an earlier intervention. Ounce of prevention, and by the time they come to me as an attorney, they are well down a path. And it is even harder to try to redirect them. So everything we can give a child to help them onto the correct path is everything we should be doing.
Thank you. Michael, you got special attention because I missed you so many times. Okay, Rebecca, time for the closing statement. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. I just wanted to say first, thank you all for this time. I appreciate everyone who participated in putting this together, everyone who took the time to come and watch. You know, I would say it's very hard to get to know somebody in these type of forums. It's impossible to really know who someone is based on these quick, short responses and limited answers. But these are great questions and they deserve more time to be discussed. I have a very open door policy, so please feel free to reach out to me, anyone, if you have more questions or want to discuss further any of these topics. I think that, you know, I got involved in this, as I mentioned before, with a student who, as a son who was a student who was in special education and really struggled. And the things that I learned from that were that MCPS needs to listen to the voices of its constituents, whether it's the students, the families, the teachers, the staff. And we need to do everything we can to provide the supports that are needed to make our students be successful.
Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, next we move to Steve.
All right, thank you, Diane. Thank you to the League of Women Voters, to all the sponsoring organizations tonight. Yeah, I hope you got to get to know me a little bit. Steve Solomon, District 4. I ask for your vote, whether by mail-in ballot, drop-off ballots, early voting, or in person on November 3rd. I don't have the educational experience or background as my colleague Shebra here does, but I'm just someone who wants to help Montgomery County be the best it can be, to do a little better for our schools. And I didn't know if this would be my priority a year ago when I decided to run, but safely reopening schools is my priority, finding a way to do that. And yes, if you want to get to better, you can hear me on the radio every afternoon. Who's this guy, Steve Solomon? Take a listen to 3 to 6 on 980 AM and hear more about me every day. I'm talking for 3 hours every day. So thank you very much.
Okay. I have a chat here that said, let Michael give his closing statement. Michael, would you like to go on now?
Sure. Michael Fryer, my website, michaelfryer.com. If you want to take a look at some of the blog posts or my thoughts, you can absolutely contact me through that. My phone number's up there. I'm a 24/7 type of person. And I try to instantly, reconnect and I'll talk to you about anything, really, education or not. I'm a 30-year veteran. I've committed my life to education, to children, to advocacy. The Board of Education is a nice natural progression where I can move from helping individuals to trying to help an entire system move forward and address things, such as the achievement gap, expand the pre-K program, get us redistricted so that we're facing our issues, and expand a bit with magnet and theme programs, and really gives kids schools to look forward to, get excited about learning. It should be something that they want to do, not are forced to do. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And Shebra Evans.
Sure. Thank you again to everyone for this opportunity. I've been really fortunate to serve on the board for the past 4 years. And in my time on the board, I've been able to travel the country to go to national school board conferences. And when I'm there, there's no one there doing what MCPS is doing. We often say you don't have to be sick to get better. The one thing I like about MCPS is that we're willing to do the work, to continue to get better, to continue to make certain that all of our students have the opportunity to thrive and to reach their full potential. I will continue to use my lens as a parent and as a school board member to make the decisions on the board. If you will have me another 4 years, I would absolutely love to have your vote in the upcoming election, whether it's early or on the day of. I really appreciate it. Thank you all again for this time.
Thank you, Shebra. Now, Lynn Harris.
Thank you. One of the things that I know after working for 12 years as an advocate in the school system, being part of MCCPTA, teaching in the schools, being a parent of a student in these schools, is that every one of our school communities is full of people who deeply care about our schools and who bring unique insights and wisdom about how we're doing as a school system. Chief among those are our students. And I really, really would love to be part of a board that truly prioritizes, as a way we do business, ongoing and substantive engagement and partnering with our communities, our teachers and staff, and our students about every single decision that we make on the board. Our students are inspiring. Our students are the ones who've been speaking with courage and forthright attention to where we need to go as a county and where we need to go as a system. Their voice needs to be emphasized, and I really would love to be part of that work.
Thank you. Sunil Dasgupta.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you to all the organizers for this event. My name is Sunil Dasgupta, and I'm running for the Board of Education at large. I'm asking for your vote and support because I believe our education system today is at the crossroads. And I have the experience, knowledge, networks, coalition, and the values to help steady this ship. I will be an independent voice, and I will bring the county together. I have stood up for equity and inclusion and support teachers and staff to bring the best education possible to all our students. If, like me, you believe that we need to stand up for public education and equal access today, please consider voting for me. If you want to learn more about our campaign or to volunteer or to contribute, please go to sunildasgupta.com. Thank you and stay safe.
Thank you all for this evening and for your answers. I am sure that you voters now have a much better idea of who the candidates are. I would also like to thank our tech person, Steve Dobres, and our timer, Nicole Williams, for her constant work tonight. I also just want to say, if you want more information, you can look at our League of Women Voters website, League of Women Voters of Montgomery County, Maryland, and you can find our voters guide, which is now out. Or if you have friends and family across the US, you can go to the site vote411.org, and there you will find the candidates for constituents all over the country. Thank you for your attention this evening, attendance this evening, and do not forget to vote. Good night.